So this is a lot of the debunkers always say, oh, we've got the ham radio operators. Yes.
Mm-hmm.
You hear that so much. The ham radio operators proves that they went to the moon. Okay. So when you look at the ham radio proof, what is the third-party ham radio proof? They've been editing this Wikipedia page now, and now all they have is this one Kettering Grammar School. Okay, a group of Kettering Grammar School used radio equipment, monitored both Soviet and U.S. spacecraft, calculated their orbits. According to the group, December 1972, a member picked up an Apollo on its way to the moon. Okay, first of all, if you have a ham radio, you have no idea where that signal is coming from. It's just signals bouncing around within Earth's atmosphere, So to say it picked up an Apollo 17 on the way to the moon, fortunately for them, they put quotes around it. Quote, picks up an Apollo on its way to the moon. Quote, it means like, at least they put quotes around that, because literally speaking, there's no way to know whether it was actually on its way to the moon or not with a ham radio.
Yeah.
They assume that, depending on when during the mission they picked up the radio.
Yeah.
It's just an assumption. If they picked it up at the beginning of the mission, they'll say, well, they're obviously on their way to the moon. If they picked it up near the end, well, they're obviously on their way back to Earth.
Yeah.
So this is a very famous article, this amateur radio, and this guy, Larry Basinger, eavesdropped on Apollo 11. And he built his own receiving dish. Okay, and so he made the news, and this was a big story. And it says here he recorded 35 minutes of the conversation of the Apollo missions. Yes, recorded 35 minutes, and he even recorded the phone call between Nixon. So he recorded. So why did he? Okay, so here's the question: why did he only able to record 35 minutes? Why did he not record to 3 hours or 6 hours? He was pointing his dish at the moon, right? But as I'm telling you, just because you point your dish at the moon does not mean anything. You can pick up all the signals which are bouncing around in the Earth's atmosphere. So why did he record 35 minutes? Because that's how long it took for the shuttle to pass from one horizon to the other.
Oh, in orbit, if it was in low Earth orbit.
It was in low Earth orbit, and that proves it. He only was able to record 35 minutes.
Oh my God, yeah.
If he was pointing his thing at the moon, and he was tracking the moon, he could have recorded many, many hours of it. Now, as I mentioned, ham radio will not know the difference between a ship on the way to the moon or a ship in low Earth orbit. There's no way for ham radio to know where is that signal coming from. So in order to know where the signal is coming from, you need a Doppler radar. Then you can know where it's coming from. Okay, so let's look at this, the Doppler radar. So the Doppler radar was not something that a public had available. This was Army in the 19th, and if you look at it here, until the 1970s, they were very heavy, these Doppler radars. There was limitations, restricted it to aircraft, night use, heavy weather, heavy jamming environments, all the way up until the 1970s. And then during the 1970s, they invented this digital fast Fourier transform type of Doppler microprocessor for the Doppler radio. So that means after the Apollo missions, these Doppler radars became smaller. Now you see like the police can see how fast you're going with your car, right? But that's but back in the Apollo days, it's not something. This was only military equipment, So no like kind of amateur guy could actually build this Doppler thing and know where the signal is coming from. Okay, but just in case some weird like mad scientist managed to build himself a Doppler radar so he could actually track the Apollo missions, how did NASA prevent third parties from spoofing Apollo communications? For a period of 5 days from from July 17 to July 21, the observatory visitor center and all access roads for several kilometers around the telescope were closed to the general public. So it means that during the Apollo missions, NASA would block off the area around their telescopes for several kilometers. Because say there was a mad scientist and he somehow managed to build his own Doppler radar, in order to track the Apollo missions, he would have actually had to gone to the observatory where and been aiming at the same direction where their dish is pointing. That would have been the only way to track it. So NASA actually took steps to prevent people from tracking the ships. It says here, you know, they drew perimeter around the dishes so nobody could get in. You have to have a special key tag to get in to the dishes at that time, you know. So the excuse that they're giving here is because if there would have been a guy with a Doppler thing, he could have jammed the signal, right? So that's the excuse they give. Oh, so they blocked off they drew a perimeter, they blocked it off. We don't want anybody to jam the signal. But really what they didn't want anybody to track the crafts.
Looks like it, yeah.
Okay.
And how about that?
That's interesting.